There is a quiet corner of American life where modern dentistry rarely sets foot, where the hum of the electric polisher and the bright overhead lamp of the dental hygienist are largely unknown. In the plain communities of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and beyond, the Amish have built a way of life that often bypasses routine teeth cleanings altogether. If quiet corners of American tradition interest you, consider subscribing so you never miss a video like this one. The reasons run deeper than simple frugality. They reach into theology, economics, geography, and a centuries-old understanding of the body that sits at odds with mainstream American health culture. For most Amish families, a dental cleaning is not a twice-a-year ritual marked on a refrigerator calendar. It is something that happens, if it happens at all, only when pain has already arrived. And by then, the conversation is rarely about cleaning, it is about pulling. The first reason has to do with insurance, or rather the deliberate absence of it. The Amish do not generally participate in private health insurance, and most decline Social Security and Medicare benefits as well. This is not oversight, it is conviction. The community believes that caring for one another financially is a spiritual obligation, not something to be handed off to outside institutions. When a family faces a large medical or dental bill, the church district often steps in through a mutual aid arrangement, sometimes called Amish aid or a similar local fund. But these funds are reserved for genuine need, and a routine cleaning rarely qualifies. Spending church money on preventive polish, when that same money could rebuild a barn after a fire, strikes most bishops as poor stewardship. In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where roughly 45,000 Old Order Amish live, as of the mid-2020s, community aid funds have been documented paying tens of thousands of dollars for emergency surgeries and cancer treatments, while a $120 hygienist visit would simply never appear on that ledger. The second reason is geography and access. Many Amish settlements sit miles from the nearest town, and travel happens by horse and buggy or by a hired driver. A trip to a dentist is not a 15-minute errand, it is a half-day undertaking that pulls a farmer away from chores, costs money for the driver, and disrupts the rhythm of a household where every hand is needed. When weighed against an invisible benefit, the polishing of teeth that feel fine, the calculation almost always favors staying home. Preventive care, by its nature, asks people to act before there is a problem. That kind of abstract reasoning runs against a culture built on the visible and the immediate. The third reason is the quiet influence of diet, though it cuts in two directions. Traditional Amish cooking leans heavily on whole foods grown or raised on the family farm. Fresh milk, eggs, garden vegetables, home-baked bread, and meat from animals the family knew by name. That kind of eating, low in the highly processed sugars that flood modern American grocery aisles, has historically protected many Amish from the worst tooth decay seen in the wider population. But the picture is not uniform. Sugar has crept into Amish kitchens through baked goods, canned fruit syrups, shoofly pie, and the famous sweet tables at weddings and church gatherings. Some communities now show rates of cavities and gum trouble similar to their non-Amish neighbors, a shift that has worried the few researchers who study plain communities. A study from 2010, published in the journal Community Dentistry and Oral Epidemiology, found measurably higher rates of untreated decay among Amish children in Ohio compared to non-Amish children in the same county. a finding that surprised researchers who had assumed traditional diets provided greater protection. The fourth reason is theological. The Amish understand the body as a vessel given by God to be cared for with gratitude, but not pampered. Vanity is a sin word in plain culture. Straight, white teeth, polished and aligned, are seen by many bishops as a worldly preoccupation, a tipping point into pride. A cleaning may not be vain in itself, but the broader machinery of modern dental aesthetics, the whitening, the veneers, the orthodontics, sits uneasily with the doctrine of humility called demut. Families who would never think of vanity still feel the weight of community expectation, and a regular hygienist appointment can feel like one small step toward a worldliness they have spent generations resisting. The fifth reason, and perhaps the most striking to outsiders, is the long Amish tradition of tooth extraction over tooth repair. When a tooth begins to ache, the default response in many districts is not a filling, not a root canal, and certainly not a crown. It is removal. The reasoning is practical and unsentimental. A pulled tooth costs less than a saved one. It does not require follow-up visits. It does not carry the risk of repeated infections years down the line. And for a community that values dentures as a perfectly acceptable solution by middle age, the loss of a tooth is not a tragedy. It is simply the next chapter. In some districts, receiving a full set of dentures as a wedding gift from parents is not unheard of, a practical gesture that eliminates future dental expense entirely and is given with the same spirit as a set of good cast iron pans. Stories from rural dentists who serve Amish patients often share a common thread. A young man in his late 20s walks in with several teeth already gone, asking to have 2 more pulled. A woman in her mid-40s requests a full extraction so she can be fitted for upper dentures, and considers the matter closed. To a dentist trained in modern restorative care, this can feel like watching a culture turn away from decades of preventive progress. To the Amish patient, it feels like common sense. Teeth, in this worldview, are tools. When a tool breaks beyond easy repair, you replace it. You do not build a small museum around it. There is also the matter of fear, though it is rarely spoken of openly. Many Amish children grow up without the gradual exposure to dental offices that English children, the Amish term for outsiders, receive from toddlerhood. By the time an adult Amish patient sits in a hygienist's chair for the first time, the experience is unfamiliar, loud, and bright. The instruments scrape, the suction hisses, and the whole encounter is shared with a stranger whose dress, language, and assumptions feel foreign. For a culture that prizes quietness and privacy, that environment is genuinely difficult. Avoidance is sometimes simply easier than enduring it twice a year. If you are watching from a small town, a farm community, or a city neighborhood where plain folk still drive their buggies past your window, drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from. We love hearing where this channel reaches. The 7th thread in this story is folk dentistry. In many Amish homes, the first line of defense against tooth trouble is not a professional at all. It is a grandmother, an aunt, or a neighbor with a remedy passed down through generations. Clove oil rubbed on a sore gum. Saltwater rinses, morning and evening. A poultice of plantain leaves drawn from the garden and pressed against an aching jaw. These remedies are not always effective in a clinical sense, but they offer comfort, autonomy and continuity with a way of life that values self-reliance. For minor trouble, they often suffice. For major trouble, they delay the inevitable trip to town, sometimes for weeks or months longer than a modern dentist would advise. Eugenol, the active compound in clove oil, is actually used in commercial dental cements and temporary fillings, which means the remedy has a genuine pharmacological basis, even if the concentration in a home application is far lower than a clinical dose. The eighth reason is generational habit. Children imitate parents. When a child grows up never seeing his mother or father visit a dentist for a cleaning, the idea simply does not occur to him as an adult. It is not rebellion against dentistry, it is the quiet absence of any expectation that dentistry belongs in his life. Researchers who have studied plain communities sometimes describe this as cultural invisibility. The service exists, the community knows it exists, but it sits outside the normal pattern of life, the way an opera house sits outside the normal pattern of a working farmer's week. The ninth thread is the role of the small handful of dentists who do serve Amish country, often quietly, often with sliding scale fees, and often by word of mouth rather than advertising. These practitioners learn to work fast, charge fairly, and respect the boundaries of plain culture. They rarely push cosmetic services. They explain costs up front. They accept cash, write paper receipts, and never assume a patient will return on a 6-month schedule. A few have become trusted figures across multiple districts, the kind of professional whose name is mentioned at the dinner table when someone finally admits that the back molar has been throbbing for a fortnight. One such practice, in Holmes County, Ohio, the heart of the world's largest Amish settlement with more than 35,000 community members, has reportedly served 3 generations of the same Amish families, adjusting fees as low as $40 for a simple extraction when a household has had a difficult harvest year. The 10th and final thread is change itself. The Amish are not frozen in amber. Different communities, different bishops, and different generations approach dental care differently. In some progressive settlements, especially in newer Western states, families do bring their children in for cleanings and even consider braces for severe cases. In stricter, old-order districts, the older patterns hold firm. The picture is not one of stubborn refusal, but of 1,000 small decisions made household by household, weighed against faith, finances, and a deeply held sense of what a body is for. What outsiders often miss is that this is not a story of neglect. It is a story of priorities arranged differently than our own. The Amish have decided, by long tradition and quiet conviction, that the mouth is something to be cared for through diet, through prayer, through community, and through the occasional firm hand of an extraction when nothing else will do. Cleanings, in this worldview, are not a moral failure to skip. They are simply not the center of the story, and in a country that often measures health by the number of appointments on a calendar, that quiet refusal to keep score may be the most Amish thing of all.